Hi, this is Lee Viramondelli, and this is the audio commentary for the Artisan Wraith issue 6, the final issue of the series. Worth noting that this series was initially solicited and made as a 7-issue series, but along the way, IDW asked, they were like, what would you think about combining 6 and 7 that were finished into a larger finale issue, and we'd have extra pages we could add to it, because there was a couple extra story pages that I just didn't have time for, and I really wanted to include them. And so that was great. I thought that's fine by me, because 6 and 7 were already finished as separate issues. And then this gave us a chance to kind of go out with a much more kind of impactful final issue. That happens sometimes in comics where, regarding sales and marketing, it's kind of interesting that sometimes having less issues benefits sales better, even if, this issue 6 now costs like double of what it was before. But it's an interesting market. You're getting into the actual issue itself here. The cover is the major new character who's kind of arrives in this issue, the character of the Wraithiest, or the Wraith Abhorrent. I wanted this kind of cosmic feel of this ancient sort of evil machine just sitting and waiting. That, I thought that was kind of a scary, ominous thing of this being that's just sort of waiting for the next kind of eon to begin. And going into this issue, the first thing we have is basically POV of the Legion when they first encountered this thing, of like walking up to it and just not knowing what it was, that, there was just this weird kind of sitting creature. The look that he has on this first page of this sort of like dog-like animal look, that is his looking like one of the creatures he wiped out. That basically, that the Wraithiest character is the reason that organic life in the Killock is gone. So all the bones that you see in the first series and the second one, those are the remnants of basically the organic life that existed until it encountered this thing. And now, after doing it and killing basically everything that was alive, he's just sort of waiting around now for the next thing, So I wanted this kind of creepy, unsettling opening where he turns and kind of looks at them, and then we get basically the history. I wanted this sequence to feel big because it's Legion Zenith, who's kind of the top authority, explaining how things went down, that a lot of characters in this universe, just by nature of their class, don't know the origins of their civilization. I thought that was an interesting idea, that that there would be even Axial class, Artisan class, like they've been kept in the dark about just what this thing is. And that's also kind of an echo of why the Wraith feels older, is that he was around for some of this, so that's why the Wraiths feel like an older race of robot, because they were existing in this time prior. And I wanted it to be clear that this thing does not have like magical powers. It's all still machine based. I wanted that was important to me, that everything in the Killock really still stay in kind of a quote unquote realistic world. So this notion, or this line, that an alchemy of long dead frequencies, that's basically how the Wraithiest is able to do what he's able to do, is that he can manipulate EMPs and that kind of thing. And I still wanted to keep it that it's not magic. There's nothing supernatural about it. But I like the notion that, if you sent a scientist today who knew everything he knew about science and frequencies back hundreds of years, with that knowledge, the science of it would seem like magic. I thought that was an interesting idea. And I wanted to have, for the first time in this series, basically all the characters sort of assembled and listening. They're all sort of on the same page for now as they have things spelled out. And then talking about the origin of the agreement between the Legion and the Forgers. So we see a flashback of the Wraithiest being sealed inside what would have become the homeworld. And we have this one flash of the first time we ever see a visual representation of a Forger. We see the hand here. And then I wanted it to still, as big as things get in this issue and going forward, I still wanted to keep the focus on the Resolve and her relationship with the Lurk, because that's kind of what began this series, and these events are being witnessed kind of from their eyes, and now these kind of security forces are now really at a much more massive level of threat than they've ever encountered before. So the Resolve is looking for the Lurk, and then meanwhile Envoy and Viscount are telling Legion Zenith, like, you told them a lot, but you didn't tell them everything. There's there's a lot more going on here. And so I wanted a bit of intrigue about multiple kind of hidden agendas here. And then this next sequence here, by the water, I enjoyed. It was really fun for me to have the characters from the first series back and just kind of chilling out. And then protected by the Legion. I like the visual of finally, at least for now, they are truly kind of safe. They're protected by this big army that's friendly to them, even though things are obviously not going well in the universe at this point. But I wanted to further push some tension between the Laborer and the Wraith here. This extends even to the first series. The Laborer, and certainly by the end, spoiler, this is a spoiler-heavy commentary for anyone listening, but like, as they all are, but this one especially, like, the Laborer's choice at the end, I wanted that to make sense. And if you look back to the first series, that's, he's always had that sort of side to him where he is a little self-centered, and he's always wanted a cure for a bit more selfish reasons than the rest of them. He has that side to himself, and so I wanted this little bit here where he kind of unintentionally really insults the Wraith and what they stand for as a Legion, where he says, well, a lot of them might die, but isn't that what you guys are for? The kind of callousness of that, it causes the Wraith to kind of get up and start walking away. And then the Laborer looks down and he sees, cans here. And so I didn't want to label it, but hopefully if you read the first series and then this one, that means he's going to start drinking again. And then this next page, we find that the Lurk has been kind of really gravely injured here, and he ends up dying. And this was a hard scene to write because I didn't know what are suitable last words that haven't seemed so cliche over and over again, and also it can't really give her enough clues about what happened. So I went through a bunch of different versions. I eventually liked this version the best, where he says things that don't make sense at the time, where he says love her even though she's right in front of him, but by the end of the issue it will make sense. So we'll get to that. The page after he died, I wanted a moment of just taking in the loss because so much stuff happens in this issue. I wanted there to be a pause before things continue. And so that's why there's this shot of the home world, kind of melancholy with the Legion ships in the sky. This next page here is the Axial finding the Resolve in the Lurk's body. And there's the shot, like the panel, panel 4 there, you see the Resolve's hands kind of showing how angry she is and how hurt, where she's crushing the table. She's not saying anything, but that's how furious. I wanted that visual in there. And then the end of this page here is a callback to when they first encounter the Axial in issue 3, where the Lurk says to her, my biggest fear is that the Resolve is going to be doing a job like this alone one day. And so this is, you'll see by the end of the issue that he's basically asked for a perfect cloak that doesn't drain your mind, and that's what the Axial has been able to create. And I like this notion that it would go basically where the Resolve's heart would be if they had hearts, but that would be where the Lurk kind of would be kept. That's the notion. So I thought visually that was a nice idea. Then this next page here, we have the Laborer confronting the Artisan, and basically the Laborer who now is drinking. So he's sort of even a little bit worse than he was. And he, again, going back to the first issue, he's never been the type of addict where it's like he's violently lashing out. He's sort of a much more dark kind of addict where his personality shifts and he's a little bit less trustworthy, like a little more insidious than just if he punched people. Although he has punched the Artisan in the past. But so this, I wanted him to kind of say to the Artisan, because of me, you're alive. I saved your life, but it was a labor class that did it. So he finally gets a little bit of kind of rubbing it in the Artisan's face. And then having the Resolve, this next page, encounter the Artisan. It's the first time she's ever seen him in his real body. And I liked the idea that her one finger essentially has the power of his Wraith body as far as he's concerned, that she could kill him. But instead, she's full of contraband material that we saw her take. So she's loaded with all this sorts of, like prototype weaponry that's not really meant to be used, but she's filled with it now. And she's asking how to see the blood of a cloaker. This next page here is the Wraith burying dead unfinished, and I wanted this to be the Resolve testing what kind of character the Wraith is. So this issue, the Resolve kind of goes around almost kind of Batman-y, and gathering clues and information of what's going down. And she's sort of heard enough about the Wraith that he is a trustworthy character. So when she intentionally makes fun of what he's doing, he punches her. And I wanted that to be a sign that, even though it's a violent act toward her, it's a positive thing because it tells her he takes it seriously and he really does value innocent life. And that's what she needed to hear. Also, I wanted this exposition to come across naturally, but basically she asked him, like, unlike the Artisan Wraith, he can actually throw a punch with some real skill. And she says, who taught you? And he says Legion Envoy. So the idea is that Envoy is the one that physically taught him and instructed him how to be a fighter. He's one of the Wraith that were taught by him, whereas Envoy would have been taught by the Zenith. So I like this it's kind of a sad scene, but them sort of burying these kids together and showing what they've learned about how you take care of those that are lost. Because it was important to me to show that they're on a world of basically the dead now. So what do you do with that? I thought it was honorable to kind of, especially with some of the kid robots here, to give them a proper sort of burial. And then this gets into the major kind of third act of this issue is, Legion Zenith and the Wraith having this conversation. And I wanted Legion Zenith to be sitting down and kind of just playing with water, being a little more human, because he's such an arch character. And this is another giant kind of scene opening up that what the real reason Legion Zenith came to the homeworld and brought the Legion here was because he's been looking for this thing called the Verdant Star, which is a planet that the Legion has sort of been promised that if they do their work, they will be able to retire there peacefully and they will live alone and they won't have to fight anymore. And so he knew by coming to the homeworld that he would have access to all the charting that the Forgers have done and all their vast technology of scoping the universe and mapping things. And so he finds it. Now, the unfortunate thing is that the reason he knew how to do that is because the Wraithiest, which was sealed in the homeworld, was able to finally achieve whispers to the Zenith. And the whispers were basically like, if you come to the homeworld, like, I will, all you have to do is free me, and then I don't care about your Legion anymore. I know we've had our differences, but here's your planet, and you're welcome to go there. Or like this, rather, the homeworld will have the knowledge you need of where your planet is. And this idea here is that that's what corrupted Legion Zenith, and that it was not for any evil reasons. It was that he really wanted to save the Legion and protect them. But it's the Wraith, who is incorruptible, that says, I can't believe that you actually talked to that thing and that you agreed with it. Obviously, you cannot trust that thing, But the notion is that Legion Zenith has been fighting for so long and doing so many horrible acts that he's just tired of commanding an army like that. And so he really does want them very nobly. He wants to be able to save them and protect them, and that it's just too much of a wear and tear to keep doing what they're doing. And so we see that he's sort of kind of given up their code, but the Wraith hasn't. And the Wraith calls him a most worthy adherent, which is sort of the worst thing you can be called, whereas that's basically like blasphemy in their vocabulary. That if you're a disciple of the Wraithiest, that's what you're called. So I wanted this tension here of the Wraith basically saying he's going to kill Legion Zenith, which is unheard of, and it's heartbreaking for him, but that's where things have gotten to. And then this big reveal here that the Resolve can now cloak. I wanted that to be a moment where she's been listening the entire time to this conversation, so she knows that it was Legion Zenith that killed the Lurk. And you can see also this splash for this big panel here. This sort of metal that runs along the Resolve's legs. That was something that I always knew what was in there, but I never knew how to when to show it. It was kind of something. But I like the notion of storing weaponry and storing additional material of her armor inside there was an interesting idea of all the weaponry is hidden on her, and it kind of gets revealed here. And then of course she can now see, thanks to talking to the Artisan, that she can see Cloaker blood, and so she knows that Legion Zenith is the one that killed the Lurk. So they have this fight here, and I wanted to get into Legion Zenith's monologue and what his thoughts are, because I thought it was interesting to show, rather than him talking, how he actually views the universe. And so he feels terrible about where things have gotten to, and he's not fighting at first here because he does question. He's like, was I wrong to do this? Like, are they right? So he's just absorbing the hits that they're taking. And he's staring up at the stars. And he's just fully ready to allow himself to die. But then he sees what he views as a sign that one of the broken pipes is releasing smoke and allowing him to see the resolve. And so the Legion is built to kind of see the world that way, where if the universe gives you a sign, that means you're on the right track. And so by seeing her, the right track is, no, you were right to come here, and these two are threatening the safety of the entire Legion. So he attacks them back. And so I wanted this one punch to be pretty brutal, where it punches her out of her cloak and also cracks her mask, her helmet, so you can see her actual eye under there. I wanted him also to hammer down her wrist and activate some of the missiles to fire at the Wraith. So I like that Legion Zenith is not a high-tech character, but he's a very crafty, kind of like the Wraith is, very crafty fighter. So he knows how to activate missiles without really knowing what missiles do exactly. He just knows how to fight in this fashion. But I wanted also this weaponry that the Wraith is being hit by. That's some of the really high-end contraband that she stole last issue. So I liked the notion that it was meant to be taken out on your enemies, and the poor Wraith is getting blasted by it. And this last panel here where the Legion Zenith punches the Wraith, I wanted it to be, one punch and his face cracks, where in the first series when he was fighting the Leviathans, it took a lot for him to actually show some visible damage. But here, it's immediate to show how strong Legion Zenith is. It's also a throwback to an earlier issue where he lifts up the Artisan Wraith with one arm. That's sort of a clue visually of things to come, where Legion Zenith is much more physically stronger than the Wraith. And then this next page, Envoy and Viscount are watching this fight going down, and I wanted this silent moment of they both know what this means at this point. To see the Legion strike the Wraith. Envoy touches Viscount tenderly and goes off to confront him. And then I like the moment here where Zenith is just unloading on the Wraith, and the resolve goes in between cloaks to block it. The idea that he's so physically strong that all they can really do is kind of endure this kind of punishment that they're taking. So then Envoy shows up, and Envoy is stronger than the Wraith, so he's able to actually knock the Zenith back a little bit, and he has this moment where he says, "Welcome back to us, brother," to the Wraith. And then this final moment here between Zenith and Envoy is meant to... What Zenith means here is that he thought that Envoy would take over the Legion. So basically they would get to this homeworld. Zenith would finally end his tenure, and then Envoy would take over, and they would have this kind of peaceful new life where there wasn't nonstop fighting and killing. And so, yeah, it's just a sad end to Envoy here, where Legion Zenith rips his head off, and Viscount watches that. And then I knew I wanted to end this issue with the Resolve and the Wraith, their heads being smashed together and seeing the damage that they were taking. And then this was initially the end of issue 6, so there would have been a 1-month gap between this and what happened next. So we added this black page here just to pause, because this is like the midpoint of this bonus size issue. And then this page here was added. This is one of the added pages. This flashback of the Lurk, I was really happy to get to put this in, because for a lot of reasons. One, it answered a question I get asked a lot, is what exactly is a kid robot versus a labor class or an artisan? Like, why are there children robots? What do they become, So this was always the idea, but there was never a place to like put it in before. But I thought this felt perfect, that it was like, this explains that if you're an unfinished robot, you basically are given these simple tasks, and whatever you excel at or don't excel at will determine what you get built into. So if you're exceptional, you could become an axial. If you are basic, you'll become a labor class. That's sort of the hardship of their society, which not really that different than ours, really, where it's like you take SATs and you get into a better school, and that decides, at least that was the old way of how the world worked, which is kind of a cold viewpoint of judging someone's ability. But yeah, I like the notion too that the Lurk here was actually a really exceptional problem solver. He was very smart, and that's why he was placed into this kind of prototype cloaking department, that they thought that that would be a good candidate. And so you see his stages of life here, where he's keeping a journal, and he's always been afraid of her being gone one day, but he's keeping notes for her of like, things he's learned in life and advice he's gotten. You can see in the background the Resolve is not finished yet either. Like, her body's being reconstructed. The Then the next panel, you see him in his more deteriorated state, and his handwriting is a lot worse. So I wanted to visually show that he's getting worse. And then this final scene here, where he says, or rather that when he writes "use my chair," and then the final thing he says, "love her." So that explains why he says those things back when he's dying. The idea is his memory is really kind of all over the place, and so the "love her" here, that's what he's remembering as he dies. So this next page here, this was initially the page for issue 7, the start, which was start with the Resolve's kind of origin. And I liked being able to put these two pages next to each other because this series sort of began with these two. And we see further how kind of awful their society is to the occupants, where she's also a really good problem solver. She's sort of like an electrician type. And they were like, well, you might be great for this program we have, this kill lock program. And so I wanted that symbol to be nice and ominous, that, just because she casually chooses to repair something in this section, it happens to be the building that the kill lock chamber is in. So this is the building that you see collapse when they first arrive in the homeworld and the Axial watches it. And then I wanted to end this here with her being excited to meet an Axial. The idea is that she really looks up to them and was really, really excited to meet one. And so it was even more of a personal betrayal to have the kill lock done to her. And so that explains her anger toward the Axial later. And then I want to end here where they sort of began, these two, where they were on the lake together. This is them sitting in their chairs. And I like this old married couple aspect to them, even though they're platonic friends, but this old, like, hanging out and, just watching the sun go down together. This quiet moment before we jump back into things. And now the battle's still in full force. You can see there's a skyscraper falling down here. The idea that the Resolve is firing weaponry that's so powerful it's not meant to be used on the homeworld. So entire buildings are coming down. And then we see Viscount here taking a moment to decide that he's going to attack Legion Zenith, and using the artillery of the ships to kind of rain fire down on him. And I wanted to further show, too, just how strong Legion Zenith is, because if the Wraith could take a lot of punishment in the first series, Legion Zenith can take even more. So, this barrage from their ships normally eradicates whole cities, but he's able to survive it. And then it's subtle here, but in the background you can see Legion Envoy's body, because it's been blasted by the fire, has sort of melted and fused with some of the large debris. So this 2-page spread next, what Legion Zenith throws there is a giant piece of debris that Legion Envoy is melted into. So you can see Legion Envoy's head there. I thought that was kind of a disturbing and unique thing for him to do, and also to show his strength, where Zenith is able to bring down one of those ships. So he destroys the bridge. He knows exactly what to aim for. And so the ship comes crashing down into the homeworld. I wanted to have the scale of this fight be something much bigger than we saw in the previous series, and also to show that it's kind of hinted at earlier. It's said that Legion Zenith had these rages in the past when he was younger, and that this is kind of one of them, where when he's really furious, he's very, very strong and very unpredictably angry. This is an idea I had very early on in this fight when I was first thinking about it, was to have the Wraith use Artisan limbs as weapons. I liked, one, because you don't really see a lot of dead Artisans ever, and then also the kind of the surgical fingers the Artisans have. I like that notion that would be a really vulnerable weapon, because you could jam it right into the Zenith's eyes, which we've established in the series. That's kind of a vulnerable point. And then I wanted the brutality of this fight, where the Resolve basically punches her hand into one of his open wounds and uses that effect from the first issue of the series, where it blasts green energy through all the various points of his body, and that still doesn't take him out. So this is an early idea I had that made me laugh, where the Wraith basically has a door in his chest. I wanted these two to... It was interesting to me to have these two come together, where the Wraith has something in this issue, in this series, where he's never had in the first series, which is actually a physically violent partner on his level, or close to his level, where the characters in the first series really are not fighters at all, but the Wraith and the Resolve are sort of a natural teaming up here. And I also liked, emotionally, she loses the Lurk but sort of gains the Wraith, and likewise the Wraith loses Legion Zenith rather, and gains her. I thought that was a nice symmetry to that. And then this joke makes me laugh too, where she says to the Wraith, "I need to climb on your back," and he, as always, the Wraith has like no sense of humor, no real understanding of subtleties. So he says, "Well, that's what the kid always wants to do, is climb on my back." She's like, "No, like we're not playing here. I'm going to cloak." And initially, I thought, what if, like, this was always an idea I had of, I like the visual of her cloaking the Wraith, because we've established that if you can touch something, you can cloak it, because the Lurk says that earlier in the series. He says there was a cloaker who could cloak rocks and throw them. The idea that they'll maintain a bit of cloak for momentarily. So if you're good enough as a cloaker, if your cloak is perfected enough, you can do that. Initially, when they're beating on Legion Zenith, I thought that was how they were going to take him out. I thought that would be the end of the fight. But the more and more I thought about it, the more I worked on it, I thought the much more interesting thing would be if Legion Zenith just wins. And that's what happens, where he just physically wins this fight. Like, this fight is over and he's the victor. And I thought that was a much more interesting and also much more realistic outcome, where the notion that, from a story standpoint, the Axial giving the Resolve the cloak, that should be the thing that takes out Legion Zenith, to explain why she has it. That's kind of the traditional story structure. But I thought it was a lot more interesting if the real benefit was just that it shows the humanity in the Axial. It's not so much that the cloak is the weapon that wins over the enemy. It's that the Resolve finally sees the Axial as kind of a human being. And the cloak doesn't win the fight, but it contributes to a huge moment between the Axial and the Resolve coming up. But yeah, so Legion Zenith wins the fight, and the thing that really takes him out is the characters in the series that have always been there but have never really had a spotlight, which is the other grunts of the Wraith army. And they're the ones that are they're the reason the Zenith did everything. They're the reason he wanted to go to the Verdant Star. They're what he's chosen to protect with his life. They're the ones that he's so sad about losing one. That's why he was so wanted to reunite with the Wraith. And so for him to watch this, and it's also being shown by Legion Viscount. Legion Viscount is the one that is showing the entire army what's happened. I wanted that moment that it's not physically Legion Zenith is beaten. He is beaten sort of morally. And so the Resolve even says that, kind of reminding him of like who you used to be. And I wanted this to be the end of the fight, where Legion Zenith, he basically sits down and he will allow himself to die now. He knows that he's lost his way. And then what the Wraith says to him is, I shall wait with you for as long as it takes. That's a reference, of course, the first time we saw Legion Zenith, when he was saying something else to someone that was worthy of that. And then this is an important little flashback here, where the Wraith is he's basically stood there all night long and watched Legion Zenith die as a tribute to him. And I wanted this one quick memory of basically the Wraith's first memory, really. So you can see here that he's with Zenith and Envoy. Those are the first two people he ever saw. And the Wraith here is a tiny little construct of dripping gold, which will be explained later on in another series. But yeah, and you also see that Envoy and Viscount are blue and silver here, that they were like he was. They looked like that before they were corrupted. So that's also why their Legion is now gray, is because the Wraith was able to talk to Viscount, or talk to Zenith, and that changed the color of the entire army. And I wanted this quiet shot of the Resolve honoring the Lurk, and just to sort of kind of burying him with his sword, or resting the sword on him. I debated her using the sword in this final fight, but I thought that was really his, and the cloak being with her is like he's with her, and that to me felt a lot more authentic. And this page here with Viscount and the Wraith, I wanted it to, this is like this talking about the stakes of where things are at. Also, I like that the Wraith is now able to be in the same room as the Viscount, which, because he's a grunt, he's not necessarily entitled to that, but because he's proven himself immensely, these two are sort of on equal footing now. And I wanted to to suggest a couple things about the future of what's coming. So they mentioned the Vast Dread and the Speculate, and these are things that are not explained here because it's something for the future. And I will get to a little bit more of that at the end here. But the notion here is that the Wraith has to leave because there's now two Wraith that he has been part of their death. In the first series, he killed one And in this one, he was part of the death of Legion Zenith, so he doesn't trust himself. No matter what his intentions, he does not trust himself to be able to mentally withstand the Wraithius whispers. Whereas Viscount has proven that he is capable of doing that. Now this page here is the Wraith and the kid. I wanted a final tender moment between the two of them. And I like the idea because they're robots, that they can stand on the top of the ship in deep space and have a conversation. I like that a lot, that, the atmosphere doesn't really affect them. And so this is a moment here that pays off later, but he tells the kid, trust in those also strong of will. Trust in the Viscount, the Axial, and the Resolve class. Those are the ones that have proven they are able to withstand the Zenith. And the kid's about to name someone. And the Wraith cuts him off and says, just trust the ones that I named. So that's a clue to something coming up that will be paid off later. But the kid hugs the Wraith, and I wanted the Wraith is almost afraid of what a hug is, because he's never experienced something like that before. So he's so gentle in how he hugs the kid back, because he could so easily destroy the kid accidentally, that he's just very gentle. And then this next page, I wanted the Wraith and the Resolve to have a goodbye where they're sort of equally respectful of one another. And it, again, kind of echoing back to that she's sort of on his level of fighting and someone he's finally can more commune with. And then in the first series, the Axial and the Wraith never met. So this is the first time meeting. And I liked the notion that he would compliment her on how effective the Killock is as a killing weapon, even though he is a victim of it. I thought that felt very much in his kind of sense of humor or lack thereof. And then this is also the Laborer confronting the Wraith. This is another sort of tension between them, of showing that the Laborer is like, he's like, well, what about us? But really he means, what about me? And so you can see his temper here. And the Wraith is not having it, because the stakes are so high, and everyone is sacrificing so much that he really is frustrated with the Laborer here. And this is the end of the Wraith leaving in this series, and he is going to the homeworld of his kind. Now, this next page here, I debated forever about what to call this actual place that they're going to. It didn't need a name, but I thought it should have one. Eventually I called it the Desert Wraithiest, because I thought that sounded scary, that sounded unusual, and I wanted it to be, even though it's sort of a desert world, I wanted it to appear like a big tear against the sun. So it's this hopefully intimidating looking like rip in space, but it's a desert world. And I wanted to have the Axial and the Resolve on the bridge with Viscount to show that they're all sort of on the same page. They're all at the same level of respect and trust now. And that the plan is basically to take all their weaponry and everything they've been practicing since the last time they encountered this thing and just bomb it out of existence before they even ever have to encounter it. But the Wraithiest also has something new that it did not have last time. And I wanted the first shot to be this flickering kind of holographic view of it, and then this red arm. That was one of the earliest ideas I had, was just a creepy looking red arm extending into the sky. And then this double page spread shows that the Wraithiest is now able to take out the Legion and turn off the members of that army, which is an ability he did not have in their prior fighting. That was really important of why the Legion was such a huge enemy, because them and the Forgers were unable to be corrupted, whereas lesser robots were. So like here now, this next thing is the Artisan being led by the Laborer, and I like the idea that the Artisan will be blind and have to figure out while blind how to land one of their ships. And so the idea is that he's smart enough to just barely pull that off because he saw how to fly earlier. And then this line from Viscount here explains why this is happening, that because the Wraithiest was able to infect the Zenith, it can get every Wraith now. And so even Viscount, who can't be corrupted, but he can be turned off, that's what happens to him. And our Wraith is only immune to this because he's too far away. Otherwise, this would have been his fate as well. And then this scene here, this important final scene between the Resolve and the Axial, I wanted the Axial to be about to die. So she's basically being blown out and would 100% have died. But this moment, the Resolve grabs her, and then next page is hugging her to protect her. So you can see that she's absorbing the impact from the debris around them. And also, she's holding the Axial the way she held the the Lurk in issue 1. That it's this sort of protective family vibe, and then that's the notion that now you're now under my protection, and I value you. And so their ship goes down. Worth noting, it crashes in the water here, So they are not dead, but that is the end of them for the series. Then this next page here, I wanted this series to end kind of with the original characters, that sort of a lot of the storylines were resolved, no pun intended, of the new characters that showed up. And so now this is back to the laborer, the kid, and the artisan. And I wanted them kind of the most vulnerable of all the people here, that they're the ones that encounter the Wraithiest. I like that they all have absolutely no chance against this thing. So when they turn around and see it, I wanted it to be just so clearly outmatched. And I wanted the Wraithiest to appear twisted and weird, like just an odd looking thing and kind of skeletal. You can see almost kind of ribs exposed there. And the first thing he says is, "Tell me something that you love." And I wanted it to be, I mean, how do you answer that question? Especially when the Wraith has said in the earlier scene of the laborer that you do not, if this thing allows you time to speak, it's not going to make a difference. It's not going to be good for you. But I like that he asked the kid, and the kid's answer is so stupid, because in that situation, anyone would be scared, but the kid is truly just happy that his hands are the same color. That felt like a very human response. And then he asked the laborer, and the laborer answers honestly, which is, a drink. And so I wanted the Wraithiest to almost appear friendly here, where he says, I like you both. And I like that about my hands as well. I thought that was a really unexpected thing for him to say, given how imposing his history is and what you've heard about him. I wanted him to actually show up and really treat the kid and the laborer with respect, that he doesn't say anything to them that's particularly sinister. Although, he does something here that's a little coming up. But then I wanted a huge moment here, which is that he demonstrates his ability in a way that actually gives the laborer what he's always wanted, which is to be free of the kill lock. So he turns it off, and so the laborer is now unlocked from the other three. And that's a pretty huge moment. And then I wanted this moment where the artisan is not quite buying that this thing is all full of good intentions. So I debated forever what the Wraithiest should say back to him, and eventually I liked the notion of just so completely destroying the artisan by speaking to him on a system only he could hear in 2 seconds, scanning his entire life and knowing who he was, just really everything the artisan was fighting for, how sophisticated he thought he was. The Wraithiest in 2 seconds basically says that you are nothing and you've accomplished absolutely nothing. And I don't even care whether you live or die out here. I wanted that to be the final kind of humiliation for the artisan in the series. The artisan finally gets, after 2 series, the artisan in this issue and the last, he finally gets what's coming to him. But I wanted it to be a little sympathetic too, because hopefully the artisan has evolved as a character, or you found him to be a little bit more relatable than in the beginning. That was always the goal. And this is a huge moment here where the Wraithiest offers to take the kid, and he'll unlock the kid, and the kid and the laborer can go live together and under his protection, and the artisan will basically just die in the desert. And the kid, wisely, because he trusts the Wraith. And even more than that, the kid goes beyond what the Wraith told him, but the kid is also finally adapting and learning. So he chooses to stay with the artisan here for a huge reason that's coming up. And I wanted the Wraithiest to do this kind of sinister, creepy thing on the way out, which is he looks back and he flashes them more of his actual dog face that he appeared in back in the day, to kind of show, because he is like a shape-shifting being of metal, that this is supposed to be very ominous, like this is not going to go good for the laborer. And then here the artisan asks, like basically the lowest point of the artisan's life, like, why did you stay with me? And the kid says, the Wraith told me to trust the strong ones. Now he's just saying that directly and honestly, because that's what he listened to what the Wraith said. And even though the Wraith didn't mention the artisan, the kid knows, because he's witnessed it, the artisan is a strong character. The artisan has a really kind of unbreakable will. And so he accidentally sort of compliments the artisan and makes the artisan feel good. So this is the first kind of really tender moment that they've had, where he puts his hand on the kid's shoulder, and the kid is now finally kind of stepping in his own agency. And I wanted that to be the final scene of this current era. And then this is an important final coda of the series. This is in the future. I wanted this sort of unknown world and unknown characters. I wanted to really feel like we're far beyond the world and the story that we've known before. And then I wanted these bones to be swimming through water. where basically you have a young unfinished talking to this unknown character and saying, like, you know, the unknown character is explaining to the kid, like, what, basically how the world works, what's happened to the world, because the young unfinished doesn't know, he's too young. And so this final page of this series is a reveal of the kid in the future, the kid as an adult. And I wanted it to be this really sort of post-apocalyptic, far future feel to it, where the bones that have been in the background of both series are alive again. They're animated and they're moving. And that's supposed to be an unexplained thing, but that's obviously tied into the Wraithiest returning. Worth noting here that the kid also has a broken Artisan eye around his neck. There's this cracked eye there. And that is the end of this story. I wanted it to obviously end on a cliffhanger and hint at the future of things to come. And then this final pinup here, that was initially the cover of issue 7 when these were 2 different issues, but we just decided to leave it in here as a pinup. I thought it was a kind of a nice final sizzling kill lock image here. And then this afterword here just explains my thoughts on sequels and what I think an effective sequel is. And that is the end of the Artisan Wraith. So I really want to thank absolutely everybody for listening in and to these commentaries, for reading the series, for emailing me and messaging me your thoughts. It really meant a lot to me. It's been a continually very rewarding experience to make this world. And this world will definitely continue. So please follow me on social media, Instagram, Twitter, as Levi Ramondelli. That's where I'm most active at. And that will also be where I talk about what the future of this series and their world will be. So thank you so much again. Take care.